The following program is classified G. It's suitable for all ages.
Tonight, increasing cost of living, shortage of consumer goods including essential food items, and dwindling foreign reserves are some of the pressing issues that the Sri Lankan government is expected to address. While the government has stated that it is taking measures to control and eventually resolve this crisis, the people are awaiting solutions that are not only effective but are also fast. What issues should Sri Lanka prioritize this year? Can our approach to address the economic crisis save us? Good evening, I'm Suzanne Shanali. This is Derana and The Morning Investigates. As far as the economy is concerned, most predictions for this year do not look very promising. Experts warn of further decline in foreign reserves, a rise in inflation and even a famine. However, in an unexpected move, the government started the new year announcing a massive relief package, which according to Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa is worth Rs 229 billion. Announcing the said package on 3rd of January, he also said that the government is mulling further steps to stabilize the economy and ease the economic burden on the people. We investigate. As exciting as this new relief package sounds, the proposed reliefs do not address many other burning issues such as declining foreign reserves, the consumer goods shortages and debt servicing. The political arena was filled with remarks both for and against the government's move, and overall there is still a huge uncertainty regarding what the economy would be like this year. The newest relief package is unlike any relief the country has seen in the recent past due to the amount of funds it requires. One thing that was noticeable was that it did not give the same attention to informal sector employees as it did to those in the formal sector. Addressing the media, Rajapaksa said,
රාජ්‍ය සේවකයින් 14,50,450ක් ඉන්නවා. මේකට සියලු සංස්ථා මණ්ඩල අධිකාරීවල අයත් අයිති වෙනවා. ඔවුන් සියලු දෙනාටම මේ මාසයේ ඉඳලා ජනවාරි මාසයේ ඉඳලා මාසික දීමනාවක් ලෙස රුපියල් 5,000ක අතිරේක දීමනාවක් ඔහුගේ පඩියට ලබා දෙනවා. ඒක මේ අයවැයෙන් ගුරු හා විදුහල්පති වැටුප් විසමතාවය ලැබිලා වැඩි වෙච්ච අයටත් හම්බ වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම අද විශ්‍රාමිකයන් හැටියට 6,66,480ක් ඉන්නවා. ඒ විශ්‍රාමිකයන් සියලු දෙනාටම රුපියල් 5,000ක දීමනාවක් මේ මාසයේ ඉඳලා ලබා දෙනවා.
Rajapaksa said that in order to provide this allowance for public sector employees, a sum of Rs 87 billion will be allocated, adding that Rs 40 billion will be allocated for the allowance for pensioners. An allowance of 5,000 rupees will be granted to disabled soldiers as well. With regard to private sector employees, he revealed.
ඒ අතර ඇමති මණ්ඩලයේ අද කම්කරු ඇමතුමාගෙන් ඉල්ලුවා ඉතාම පෞද්ගලික අංශයේ හාම්පුතාවන් කැඳවලා ඒ වෘත්තීය සමිති එක්ක සාකච්ඡා කළා පෞද්ගලික අංශයටත් මේ වැඩිවීමට සමානුපාතිකව උන්ට ඒ අතිරේක මුදලක් ලබා දීමට උත්සාහ කරන්න කියලා.
The government has also decided to provide an additional Rs 1,000 monthly allowance for Samruddhi beneficiaries who are receiving Rs 3,500 monthly, adding that there are 1,793,000 Samruddhi beneficiaries in the country. He said that an additional allowance will be given to those who receive less than 3,500 rupees as well, depending on the amount they receive through the Samruddhi program. Speaking of relief measures for farmers and crops, Rajapaksa said,
මේ ආණ්ඩුව ආපු හැටියෙම ගොවීන්ගේ වීවල සහතික මිල කිලෝ එකට රුපියල් 50 කරා. ඒක තාමතර අපි හිතනවා අස්වැන්න 120ත් 30ත් අතර ගානකින් අඩු වෙයි කියලා. අපි 150ක් අඩු වුණත් 50කට 125ක් වෙනවා රුපියල් 25ක් වෙනවා 150 වුණොත් ඒ අනුව අපි ගොවියට මේ සහතික අතිරේක රුපියල් 25 ඒ කියන්නේ රුපියල් 75ක් කිලෝවකට ගොවි ජනතාවට ලබා දෙනවා. ඒ අනුව ඒ වගේම මේක පාරිභෝගිකයන් නොදැනෙන්න පාරිභෝගිකයාගේ සහල් මිලට බලපෑමක් නොවන විදිහට මේ රුපියල් 25 රජය විසින් සහනාධාරයක් ලෙස ඒ ගොවියට ලබා දෙනවා. අපි දන්නවා මේ දවස්වල සියලුම ජනතාවගේ එළවලු සහ අනිකුත් පළතුරු වගේ වයි මිල වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒකට හොඳම විසඳුම හැටියට අද අමාත්‍ය මණ්ඩලයේ සාකච්ඡා වුණා. මහින්ද රාජපක්ෂ ආගමතුමා ජනාධිපතිතුමා කාලෙ කරපු දිවිනැගුම අපි වවමු රට නගමු කියන වැඩපිළිවෙළ වල සාර්ථකව gedara ගෙවත්තේ වගා කිරීමක් සිද්ධ කරා. මේ රටේ ගෙවතු purchase 20ට අඩු 20යි අඩු ගෙවතු තියෙනවා 18,36,266ක්. මේ සියලුම ගෙවතු වගා කිරීම සඳහා රුපියල් 5000ක උදව්වක් කරනවා ගොවින්ට. ඒ වගේම අක්කරයට අඩු purchase 20ට වැඩි ගෙවතු තියෙනවා 22,38,831ක්. ඒ අයට රුපියල් 10,000ක මුදලක් දෙනවා. ඒ දෙකලටම එයා සමාන 6 මාසයකට පස්සේ මේ ගෙවත්ත වගා කළා හරියට තියුණොත් ඒ purchase 20ට අඩු කට්ටියට නැවත රුපියල් 5000කුත් purchase 20ට වැඩි අක්කරයට අඩු අයට ඒ අයට රුපියල් 10,000කුත් දෙන්න.
According to Rajapaksa, to grant the allowance for farming in gardens, the government will allocate 31 billion rupees. It was also noted during the said press briefing that the government has decided to introduce a subsidy for estate sector workers. Under this program, each estate sector family will receive 15 kilograms of wheat flour a month at rupees 80 per kilogram. Rajapaksa noted that this is a relief of around rupees 40 per kilogram and that all those who have registered with the Employees Provident Fund will be eligible for this relief. In addition, Rajapaksa noted that all essential food items and medicines will also be expected from all taxes. Rajapaksa assured that the government is not intending to impose new taxes to cover the cost of the government has to bear due to the granting of the said reliefs. In response to questions posed by the media, he said that in order to revive the economy, discussions are underway with the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank and the International Monetary Fund or the IMF, as well as with the several friendly nations such as Japan and India. Speaking to us in this regard, the Advocata Institute's Chief Operating Officer Dhananath Fernando raised concerns about how the government can finance this relief package in a way that does not affect inflation and other activities in the country.
According to the Finance Minister, he is going to use the money which was allocated in the budget. I think there are two sides that we have to look into. One is why we have to announce another relief package just after 1 month of presenting the budget. Literally, we are kicking off the budget proposals from 1st of January, and that is at the beginning of this year, Finance Minister announced another relief package. So this can be perceived as lack of consistency in our policy, because just after 1 month of budget, there's another relief package being announced. So the investors may look a little suspicious on these proposals. That's investors' side, but I understand there's a lot of concerns from the people with high cost of living, food inflation hitting 22% and the headline inflation hitting about 12%. That pressure has also been mounting at the grassroots level. So maybe Finance Minister considered this as a proposal to provide some relief for people. But that's the other side. But at the same time, we have to look at how are we going to finance this. If we are going to finance it from increasing taxes, which Finance Minister categorically said that we are not going to do any reforms on the tax, we are not going to increase any taxes, he's going to finance through the allocation from the previous budget, then there has to be some expenditure items that we have to cut down. Looks like it's from the capital expenditure, not from the recurrent expenditure, because recurrent expenditure, there's very little room for us to cut down on recurrent expenditure. So if you're going to cut down it from capital expenditure, from which budget lines are we going to cut it down? Whether it's from the highways or whether it's from education, healthcare, from which budget line item that we have to cut it down is something that we have to closely monitor. The worst case scenario could be, in my view, if you are going to finance it through borrowing money from the central bank, that could be really, in my view, inflationary.
Meanwhile, economist and business cycle analyst Dr. Kenneth De Silva said that this relief package introduced to address the rising cost of living is a result of both external and internal shocks, and that his strategy has been received in the market with some apprehension.
The fiscal stimulus, primarily that it should be given to more productive use in terms of either looking at corporate balance sheets, bailing out some of those balance sheets which are underwater, stimulating production, and incentivizing the production side of the economy to help overcome the more medium-term challenges. But nevertheless, that's been done and dusted, and I think the overall sentiment seems to be somewhat mixed, and I think that is expected because I think the country is still in recovery mode, and I think overall the policy package seems to have addressed the more important stakeholders of the economy who are also finding it difficult at this point of time.
With regard to debt servicing in 2022 and inflation, Dr. De Silva said that most of the economic activities that involve exporting goods add to the country's overall external debt burden and also inflation. Referring to imports, which have a high impact on inflation and foreign currency exchange rates, he said,
we import about $3 billion on an annual basis, which is a significant factor in the overall balance of payments. And when global crude oil prices also do increase, we have to absorb that and pass it on to the consumer. So all in all, the external shocks are a key component of inflation.
He also said that as a result of inflation, the government and/or the private sector may have to adjust wages to accommodate the overall consumption patterns. With regard to Sri Lanka's debt repayment ability, which many parties have raised doubts about, Dr. De Silva noted that in a context where Sri Lanka has maintained an impeccable debt servicing track record, debt servicing in 2022 would not be an unmanageable challenge. He made this statement when asked about a recent statement made by the CBSL that Sri Lanka will not have to face any issue in repaying debts. He also spoke about the link between international financial assistance and the Fitch rating recent downgrading of Sri Lanka's long-term foreign currency issuer default rating from CCC to CC.
I mean, the overall rating downgrades have impacted us in the sense in our access to global capital markets, and as a result of those downgrades, our cost of credit or the cost of borrowing has increased. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that there isn't global funding out there for CCC or even a D-rated entity or a sovereign. There are, but it is at what cost that you can borrow, and as a result of those high borrowing costs, the government has stayed away from accessing capital markets, and rightly so, and has shifted the overall structure of the economy from an external driven funding program to more internally manageable funding and financing. So that's a good development.
He noted that Sri Lanka's debt is far less than what is projected and that the country's net debt for 2022 is about $2 billion, which he said is manageable. Adding that Sri Lanka had a much more difficult situation in 2020 and 2021, Dr. De Silva said that debt servicing in 2022, including the first tranche due to this month, would be relatively easier.
And I don't think there are any issues in servicing this debt obligation. Even though it's perceived outside that there are significant stresses, from a cash flow point of view, from a national cash flow point of view, I don't see any stresses coming from servicing this debt currently. And I think that's something that is important because Sri Lanka has kept an impeccable debt servicing track record, and I think maintaining that is paramount. And
while the relief package the government announced could help many, the experts raised concerns about the source of funding for this program. However, they are of the opinion that giving reliefs to the people must not later become a burden on the economy. Another concern they raised was whether Sri Lanka is able to repay its debts this year, about which various parties have expressed different opinions. After the break, we investigate further. Welcome back. Amidst the worsening economic situation and uncertainty regarding the future of this situation, the most common question the people ask is how is 2022 going to be any different from last year? We also looked into the challenges Sri Lanka has to face this year and the immediate steps that need to be taken. Here's the rest of our investigation. According to Fernando, the main challenge for Sri Lanka in 2022 would be implementing economic reforms. He stressed that although a multiple of opinions have been conveyed regarding settling mounting debt repayments and improving export and foreign reserves, he was of the opinion that Sri Lanka focus on achieving all of that, not just one.
There are fundamental flaws in our structure in our economy. So we have to basically do those structural reforms, because without doing those structural reforms, none of those outcomes would be possible in my view. So first of all, doing those economic reforms, and if I were to prioritize three, first, I think we have to move to a cash transfer system, because when you do the economic reforms, it would be very painful for the poor people because it would be high cost of living. Structural reforms have always been painful for the poor people, so there has to be a cash transfer system digitally done based on market pricing for the most vulnerable sections of the society, so we establish a proper safety net. And second, reforms on state-owned enterprises, that has been key, because we have about 527 state-owned enterprises, massively, colossally loss-making. We no longer can bear those losses. Thirdly, I think our monetary policy has to be fixed. It's too, I think, inflationary, so we have to fix the monetary policy, including some of the reforms to the central bank.
With regard to the current approach of the government towards addressing economic challenges, he said that many changes need to be done and that priority should be given to the 3 points he highlighted. Speaking of the ongoing discourse about whether Sri Lanka should seek the IMF support, Fernando said that a plan as to how the economy should be revived should come from within the country, although the IMF's involvement and support could certainly be advantageous.
The starting point has to be Sri Lankan policymakers coming with a reform agenda. Whether we go to IMF or not, we have to do reforms. Without having a reform agenda for ourselves, there is no point basically discussing whether we should approach IMF or not. Because even if you approach IMF, they will basically ask, what are the reforms that you are going to do as a country to increase the productivity and efficiency of the economy? So first we should have the agenda, whether we go to IMF or not, because first reforms ourselves. IMF will be somewhat at an advantage because they will bring the credibility, they will bring that seal that we are good for money, because they are basically monitoring the books when we are on an IMF program.
Meanwhile, speaking of the economic situation and the government policies, economist and Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, or the SLPP parliamentarian, Professor Ranjit Bandara, said that the economic challenges Sri Lanka is facing are not limited to Sri Lanka and that most of these issues are common to other countries as well. He also expressed confidence about the country's ability to repay loans.
Now, the challenges what Sri Lanka might facing for year 2022, I would say, could be common to many countries in the world, particularly the countries in the development regions. Now, why I say the problems are common, because no matter what is the size and what is the nature of the economic activity that involve, the global pandemic taken the issues to a next level, which are common to every developing country. I wouldn't say that the issues are not so common to developed nation. The developed nation also having a series of issues, and we could see that the many countries are facing immense of challenges of managing their internal issues with the COVID. And let me look at what are these challenges are. Now, if you look at the overall macroeconomic imbalance, what we are having right now could be many. Now, many of us talked about the foreign reserves. The foreign reserve is one of the problems which is an outcome of many problems. Now, why we aren't having enough or rather adequate of foreign reserves at the central bank? The Sri Lanka loss, it's a promising foreign earning sources, a remittance, a tourism, and certain vital service exports.
He added that due to this situation, Sri Lanka is becoming a trading economy and is focusing on production. Speaking of opinions expressed by various parties that Sri Lanka may have to deal with a famine soon, Professor Bandara opined that a famine will never occur in Sri Lanka. Professor Bandara also said that giving subsidies, even though sometimes necessary, is not a long-term option and explained.
The Sri Lanka is still a welfare kind of economy. And at least 25% of the population depends on some form of the government support. Samurdhi could be one. And there are many. The government, subsidiary support schemes, they are to support the poor. Now, rising retail prices. Why is retail prices are rising? Retail prices are rising because we depend so much of import stuff, essentials, food items, oil, gas, and it could be about 75% of our consumption basket consists of imported commodities. And as a result, when the global market price of those commodities are increased, naturally, the local market prices of those commodities increase. We have no choice. The government can't subsidize every single commodity that we import and the price tend to increase because we don't earn enough revenue to support such a subsidy schemes.
He stressed that dependency on the state is also on the rise and that in a context where the government is also suffering massive losses due to loss-making state institutions, this could be a bigger problem in 2022. In addition, Professor Bandara explained that in 2022, the government might have to increase the tax revenue. However, the main opposition party, the Samagi Jana Balawegaya or the SJB, is of the opinion that the government's approach to addressing the economic decline needs to be changed. Addressing a press briefing on the 5th of January, SJB MP Eran Wickramaratne said that in order to revive the economy, the government must take 4 measures immediately, namely building trust between Sri Lanka and the international community, including financial entities, to get more international support, bringing the value of the rupee to the actual market value to encourage foreign currency inflows, negotiating with lenders seeking debt restructuring while presenting Sri Lanka's own conditions, and making the CBSL independent in order to enable it to perform its main duties. In the same press conference, SJB parliamentarian Dr. Harsha De Silva also expressed his opinions and views on the economic situation of Sri Lanka.
Well, I mean, the explanation given by the finance minister in his cabinet paper yesterday is that they are not willing to bring the currency into its actual market value and to increase the, I believe, tax rate, VAT. So that is the explanation.
While the economic situation remains uncertain, the people have to go about their daily lives. While immediate reliefs can really ease the economic burden on the people, as those who spoke with us underscored, there should be more clarity regarding the source of funds for these relief packages, and such programs must not increase the cost of living later. At the same time, equal attention needs to be paid to other pressing issues in the economy. The failure to do so will worsen certain issues when certain issues get addressed, because all major issues in Sri Lanka is facing currently, according to experts, are connected. In case you have missed to watch any of our programs we have aired tonight, you can always rewatch on catching us on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Derana English. Thank you for taking the time to join us on Investigates. We'll return next week with another matter that affects you and me. Till then, see you soon.